What's the most shocking thing a dying person ever confessed to you? I was working the night shift at Mercy General when they brought in Mrs. Rodriguez, 83 years old, multiple organ failure, maybe 6 hours left according to Dr. Patterson's grim assessment delivered in that clinical tone doctors use when death becomes inevitable. Her family had been called from across the city, but she grabbed my wrist when I checked her IV with surprising strength for someone so close to death. "I need to tell someone," she whispered, her voice raspy but urgent. "Before I go, please, you have to listen to me." I'd heard plenty of deathbed confessions in my 12 years as a nurse working these halls that had witnessed thousands of final moments. Adultery, stolen money, family secrets that had festered for decades. Nothing surprised me anymore. Old people facing eternity suddenly felt compelled to unburden themselves of guilt they'd carried their entire lives like stones in their pockets. I pulled up the uncomfortable plastic chair that had probably supported thousands of grieving relatives over the years, expecting the usual confession about a hidden affair or unpaid debts. Maybe she'd cheated on her taxes for years or had an argument with her sister she never resolved. Something typical. "What is it, Mrs. Rodriguez?" I asked gently, adjusting her thin hospital blanket that never seemed to provide real warmth no matter how many we layered on top of each other. Her grip tightened, weathered nails digging into my skin with desperate intensity that left little crescent-shaped marks. "My grandson Diego, the one who died in Afghanistan 3 years ago." I nodded sympathetically, settling into my practiced, compassionate expression. She'd mentioned him before during her previous visits for diabetes management, always with tears streaming down her weathered cheeks that had seen 8 decades of joy and sorrow. Gold Star grandmother, his framed photo by her bed showing a handsome young man in dress blues with kind eyes and a warm smile. The whole hospital staff knew about her sacrifice, how she'd lost her precious grandson to an IED explosion outside Kabul while he was serving his country. We all made sure to be extra gentle with her during treatments. "He didn't die over there," she said, her dark eyes boring into mine with an intensity that made my spine crawl like ice water dripping down my back. My stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a cliff into free fall. "What do you mean?" "He never enlisted, never left California, never even made it to basic training at Fort Benning like I told everyone who would listen. I made it all up. Every single word, every detail, every tear I shed in public for 3 years. The words hit me like ice water flooding my veins, freezing my blood solid and making my head spin. I stared at her wrinkled face, searching desperately for signs of dementia or medication confusion that would explain this impossible statement. But her eyes were sharp, desperate, completely lucid. This wasn't morphine-induced delirium, or the confused ramblings of someone whose brain was shutting down. She knew exactly what she was saying. "Mrs. Rodriguez, that's impossible. You have his Purple Heart displayed in your living room. The folded flag from his coffin sits on your mantle like a shrine. The military funeral with full honor guard. I've seen the photos you show everyone. The 21 gun salute, the bugler playing taps, the precision drill team. All fake," she interrupted, her voice getting stronger with each word despite her body failing. "Every bit of it. The medal cost me $60 on eBay from some con artist in Nevada. The flag came from a military surplus store downtown. The funeral was completely fabricated, a performance worthy of Broadway." I felt physically sick, like someone had punched me in the stomach and knocked all the air from my lungs. This woman had received sympathy meals for years from church ladies who clucked their tongues about the tragedy of war. The VFW honored her every Memorial Day, presenting her with flowers and certificates of appreciation, while she stood there in her black dress accepting their gratitude. Local news interviewed her annually on Veterans Day, her story a reminder of the ultimate sacrifice families make for freedom. She wore a gold star pin to church every Sunday, accepting condolences from strangers who whispered prayers for her fallen hero grandson. The entire community had rallied around her grief, organizing fundraisers and bringing casseroles and offering to help with yard work. "But how could you possibly?" I stammered, unable to complete the thought because it was too monstrous to voice. She closed her eyes, tears leaking from the corners and running down her cheeks in streams that had carved permanent tracks over the past 3 years. Because the truth was so much worse than a hero's death. Because I was a coward who couldn't face reality, couldn't admit my precious grandson had become a criminal. "What truth?" I whispered, afraid to hear the answer, but unable to stop myself from asking because nurses always need to know everything. Her breathing became labored, the machines beeping faster as her heart struggled to keep pumping blood through veins that were giving up. "Diego was arrested for armed robbery when he was 19. 3 strikes law. Life sentence without possibility of parole. 3rd felony, automatic life imprisonment. I couldn't bear the shame, couldn't face the neighbors who'd watched him grow up playing in our front yard, the church congregation who'd prayed for him during confirmation, the family who'd believed he was special. "So you told people he enlisted instead of going to prison?" She shook her head weakly, the movement taking enormous effort. "No, that wasn't enough to satisfy people. They would ask questions, want to visit him or write letters or send care packages. I told them he died a hero's death serving his country. Bought a fake Purple Heart online for $60 from some scammer in Nevada, who probably sells hundreds of them. Had his childhood friend Rico help me stage everything. The funeral, the military honors, the whole elaborate lie that became my life. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was spinning, reality tilting sideways like a ship in a storm. "Mrs. Rodriguez, where is Diego right now, right this moment?" "Pelican Bay State Prison. Maximum security, cell block D7. He's been there for 3 years, 4 months, and 16 days. I know because I count every single one like rosary beads." like a countdown to my own death. The machine started beeping faster as her heart rate spiked dangerously. Her family was arriving. I could hear familiar voices in the hallway. Carmen's distinctive nervous laugh mixed with worried murmurs from her brothers and their wives. They'd be here any minute, expecting to say goodbye to their beloved matriarch, not knowing they were about to have their entire reality shattered like glass hitting concrete. The funeral? I stammered, trying to process this bombshell that was rewiring everything I thought I knew about grief and truth and human nature. Empty casket, she said matter-of-factly, like she was discussing the weather. Rico knew someone at Peaceful Rest Mortuary who owed him favors from their gambling days at the casino. We filled it with sandbags and old clothes to make the weight seem right when the pallbearers carried it. The funeral director never questioned it. Military deaths overseas, closed casket ceremonies happen all the time when bodies are too damaged to display. She grabbed my hand again with both of hers, her skin paper-thin but grip iron-strong. But that's not even the worst part of this nightmare I created for my family. My blood ran cold, ice crystals forming in my veins. How could there possibly be something worse than faking your grandson's death and lying to an entire community for 3 years while accepting their sympathy and support? What's the worst part? I asked, though every instinct screamed at me not to dig deeper into this pit of deception and cruelty. Her eyes locked onto mine with terrifying intensity, pupils dilated from medication but mind crystal clear. Rico's been blackmailing me for 3 years, taking my social security checks, my pension money, everything I have, threatening to expose the whole lie if I don't pay him whatever he demands whenever he demands it. Mrs. Rodriguez? I started, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. And yesterday, I finally found out why he really helped me stage Diego's death. The real reason he was so eager to help me create this elaborate fraud instead of just letting me grieve privately. I felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss, about to fall into something much darker than I'd imagined possible. What reason? She paused, gasping for air, the effort of speaking clearly draining her remaining strength like water flowing from a broken dam. Rico was the store owner Diego robbed, the man who pressed charges, who testified against him in court, who demanded the maximum sentence under 3 strikes law. My world tilted completely off its axis, and I grabbed the bed rail to steady myself. What? Rico knew that if Diego went to prison for life, he could control me forever, use me, torture me slowly over years. He planned the whole thing, the fake death, the funeral, the blackmail scheme. Everything was calculated revenge for what Diego did to his store, his business, his sense of security. The door opened just as she finished speaking. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter Carmen walked in, still wearing her hospital scrubs from her own nursing shift across town, tears streaming down her face at seeing her mother so close to death. Behind her came Miguel, her eldest son, and Rosa, who'd driven through the night from Phoenix after getting the call. "Mama," Carmen whispered, rushing to the bed and taking her mother's free hand, while Miguel hung back awkwardly, and Rosa immediately started praying in Spanish. Mrs. Rodriguez squeezed my hand one last time before turning to her children. "Mijos, I need to tell you something important. Something terrible that I've been hiding for 3 years." Carmen's face went white, her nursing training probably recognizing the tone people used before devastating revelations. "Don't talk, Mama. Save your strength. The whole family's coming. Antonio's driving down from San Francisco. The cousins are flying in tomorrow morning. Mrs. Oh." Rodriguez ignored her daughter's pleas with the stubborn determination of someone who'd run out of time for politeness. "Rico didn't just take my money for 3 years. He took something much more precious than money could ever be." "What?" I asked, though part of me desperately didn't want to know because each revelation was worse than the last. Every month for 3 years, Rico forced me to write letters to Diego in prison, telling him I'd disowned him completely, that his family was ashamed of what he'd become, that we'd rather pretend he was dead than admit he was our grandson rotting in prison. Carmen gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Mama, no. Please tell me you didn't send those letters." "Diego thinks we abandoned him completely." Rico made sure of it. He intercepted every letter Diego tried to send us from prison, every attempt at communication, told the prison administration we didn't want any contact, made them put Diego on a no-communication list with his own family. Miguel stepped forward, his face dark with confusion and growing anger. "What the hell is going on here? Who's Rico? And what's this about letters to Diego? Diego's been dead for 3 years." Mrs. Rodriguez turned to her son with enormous effort. "Sit down, mijo. All of you. I need to tell you something that's going to change everything you believe about our family, about the past 3 years, about everything." "Mama, you're scaring us," Rosa said, still clutching her rosary beads. "You need to rest. The priest is coming to give you last rites." Mrs. Rodriguez took a shuddering breath that seemed to come from her very soul. "Your nephew Diego isn't dead. He's been in prison this whole time, thinking we hate him and abandoned him to rot like garbage." The silence that followed was deafening. Carmen's face went completely white, then flushed red, then white again. Miguel stepped back like he'd been slapped. Rosa stopped praying and stared with her mouth open. "That's impossible," Carmen finally whispered. "We buried Diego 3 years ago. I saw his body in the casket. Closed casket ceremony." Mrs. Rodriguez interrupted. "You saw a flag-draped box filled with sandbags and old clothes? But the military escort, the honor guard, the folded flag presentation. I remember every detail," Miguel said, his voice rising. "Rico arranged everything. Hired actors, bought fake uniforms, created an elaborate performance worthy of Hollywood." Carmen stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back like a caged animal. "This is insane. You're telling me Diego is alive? That we mourned a living person? That I cried over an empty grave every Sunday for 3 years? Every Sunday for 3 years, we've been putting flowers on a grave containing bags of sand, while Diego sits in a prison cell believing his grandmother thinks he's dead to us. The machine started alarming as Mrs. Rodriguez's blood pressure spiked dangerously. She was running out of time, but she kept talking with desperate urgency like someone trying to finish a confession before the priest left. There's more, mijos. There's a safe deposit box at First National Bank downtown. Keys taped under my jewelry box at home, behind the photo of your father in his army uniform. Everything's documented. The fake death certificate, the blackmail letters, the forged funeral documents. I've been preparing for this moment for months, gathering evidence like a detective. Mama, why didn't you tell us? Carmen asked, tears streaming down her face. About Diego, about the blackmail, about any of this nightmare? We're your children. We could have helped. I was protecting you and your children. Rico threatened your families too. Said if I told anyone the truth, he'd hurt your kids. Make sure social services took them away. He knew about Rosa's husband's immigration status. Threatened to call ICE. He knew about Miguel's gambling debts. Threatened to tell his wife and ruin his marriage. Carmen began crying harder. We could have figured something out together. We're family. That's what families do. You are helping now by being here, Mrs. Rodriguez said. But Rico will be here soon. He always comes during evening visiting hours, pretends to be family to get past security, charms the nurses with his friendly smile. I stood up, my legs shaky. I'm calling hospital security right now. No, she gasped. Let him come. I have one more surprise for him that will end this nightmare forever and give him exactly what he deserves. Carmen looked between us, trying to process the information overload that was rewriting her entire understanding of reality. Mama, I need you to slow down and explain everything from the beginning. This is too much, too fast. Mrs. Rodriguez reached under her pillow and pulled out a small digital recording device, the kind private investigators use for surveillance. I've been recording our conversations for weeks. Every threat Rico made, every demand for money, every cruel detail about what he did to Diego and our family. Rico bragged about the whole plan, how he set up Diego's downfall, how he's been systematically torturing us for 3 years like a cat playing with mice. She pressed the device into my hand with trembling fingers. When he comes tonight, he'll confess everything. He can't help himself. He's proud of what he accomplished. He wants me to know how clever he's been before I die. It's the final insult he's been saving. Mrs. Rodriguez, you need to rest. This stress is killing you faster than the organ failure. Promise me, she wheezed, gripping my wrist again with supernatural strength. Promise you'll expose him. Clear Diego's name. Let my family know their nephew is alive and needs them more than ever. I nodded, gripping the recorder like it was a weapon. I promise on my life. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, getting closer. Heavy boots with metal heel taps clicking against the linoleum. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes widened with fear, mixed with grim satisfaction. That's him, she whispered. Rico always wears those heavy boots with metal heel taps. I know that sound anywhere. It's been haunting my dreams for 3 years. A man in his 40s appeared in the doorway. Average height, kind face, graying temples, holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers and a sympathy card. He looked like any concerned family friend paying respects to a dying woman, the kind of person you'd trust to watch your house while you were on vacation. I'm so sorry to hear about your mother, he said to Carmen with what seemed like genuine sympathy, his voice warm and comforting. I'm Rico Montenegro, an old family friend of your mother's. We've known each other for years through the neighborhood association. Carmen wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Thank you for coming, Mr. Montenegro. It means a lot that she has friends who care enough to visit during her final hours. Miguel stepped forward and shook Rico's hand. I don't think we've met. I'm Miguel, Elena's eldest son. Of course, Rico said smoothly. Your mother talks about you constantly. The successful businessman with his own construction company. She's so proud of all her children. Rico approached the bed slowly, his demeanor shifting subtly when he saw Mrs. Rodriguez's alert, watchful eyes. The mask slipped for just a moment. I caught a flash of cold calculation before the concerned expression returned like a switch being flipped. How are you feeling, Elena? He asked, his voice taking on a different tone, more intimate and threatening despite the gentle words. Mrs. Rodriguez stared at him silently, her jaw set with the determination of someone who'd spent months planning this moment. Rico glanced at Carmen, Miguel, Rosa, and me. Could we have a moment alone? I'd like to say goodbye privately. We have some personal matters to discuss. Old friends, you understand? Actually, Mrs. Rodriguez said with surprising clarity, I'd like them to stay. Whatever you have to say can be said in front of my family and my nurse. No more secrets. Rico's smile faltered slightly, like a crack appearing in a mask. Elena, we need to take care of those insurance papers I mentioned on the phone earlier. Make sure everything's in order for your family's financial security. What insurance papers? Carmen asked suspiciously, her nursing instincts kicking in. I'm handling all of Mama's paperwork. I have medical power of attorney, and I've never heard of any insurance issues. Mrs. Rodriguez kept staring at Rico with steel in her dying eyes. Tell them about Diego, Rico. Tell them what you did to my grandson. Rico's face went pale, his friendly mask cracking further. You're confused, Elena. The medication is making you say strange things. Maybe we should let you rest. Tell them how you set up my grandson. How you've been bleeding me dry for 3 years while he rots in prison thinking his family abandoned him like garbage. Carmen looked between them, confusion and dawning horror spreading across her face like sunrise. What's he talking about, Mr. Montenegro? Rico forced a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. She's hallucinating, I'm afraid. This is what happens at the end. People create elaborate fantasies, paranoid delusions, It's tragic, really, but quite common. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled weakly and nodded to me. Show them the recorder. I held up the digital device with shaking hands. Rico's eyes went wide, pupils dilating with panic as he realized he'd walked into a trap. What recorder? Miguel demanded. What the hell is going on here? Rico lunged for the device desperately, but I stepped back quickly. Security! I yelled as loud as I could, my voice echoing down the hallway. You stupid old woman! Rico snarled, his mask completely dropping now to reveal the predator underneath. You think this changes anything? Even if they believe your crazy story, Diego's still locked up in maximum security, still thinks you hate him, still lost 3 years of his life believing he was dead to his family. Not anymore, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered with deep satisfaction. She pulled out a cell phone from under her blanket. Somehow she'd been hiding it the entire time we'd been talking, planning every word of this confrontation. I called him yesterday, told him everything, the whole truth about what you did to him, to us, to our family for your sick revenge. Rico's face twisted with pure rage, spit flying from his mouth. That's impossible. I control all your communications. I had your phone service disconnected months ago when you couldn't make the payments. You controlled my landline, not this phone Carmen gave me last week for emergencies. Carmen gasped, understanding flooding her face. The phone was just supposed to be for calling 911 if you fell or had a medical emergency. This was my emergency, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Diego knows the truth now. He knows we never stopped loving him, never stopped believing in him, never gave up hope. Security officers appeared in the doorway, drawn by my shouts and the commotion. Rico looked around wildly like a trapped animal, realizing his 3-year scheme was collapsing around him. Ma'am, one officer said to me, we got a call about a disturbance. What's the situation here? I handed them the recorder with shaking hands. This man has been blackmailing Mrs. Rodriguez for 3 years. She's documented everything. This device contains recorded confessions of extortion, fraud, and conspiracy. Rico made a desperate grab for Mrs. Rodriguez's phone, but the officers restrained him before he could reach it, their training kicking in as they assessed the threat. You ruined everything, he screamed at her, spittle flying from his mouth as his composure completely shattered. 3 years of perfect planning. Do you have any idea how much work this took? How many details I had to coordinate? Tell them about the robbery, Mrs. Rodriguez said calmly, her voice getting weaker but her resolve unwavering. Tell them why you really wanted revenge on my family. Rico's face crumpled as the full weight of his situation crashed down on him like a building collapse. You don't understand what that kid did to me. He destroyed my store, my livelihood, 20 years of building my business from nothing. I lost everything because of your precious grandson and his selfish choices. So you decided to destroy our family in return, Carmen said, understanding flooding her face like sunrise after the darkest night. He deserved prison, Rico spat, his voice filled with 3 years of accumulated bitterness. Armed robbery, threatening innocent people with a loaded gun. But you people, always making excuses, always crying about your war hero grandson, getting sympathy from the whole neighborhood, special treatment everywhere you went, free meals, priority seating, discounts at stores. It made me sick watching you play the grieving grandmother while I rebuilt my life from scratch. So you decided to torture us instead of letting us heal naturally, I said, disgusted by this man's systematic cruelty. Rico laughed bitterly, the sound echoing off the hospital walls. I decided to get justice and compensation for my losses. Your family owed me everything you paid over these 3 years and more. The officers began reading Rico his Miranda rights in practiced voices. As they prepared to lead him away in handcuffs, he turned back one last time with pure venom in his eyes. This won't bring back those 3 years, Elena. Diego still lost them. Still suffered in maximum security, getting beaten up by other inmates who thought he was abandoned trash. Still went to sleep every night thinking his family had written him off completely. You can't undo that psychological damage. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded sadly, tears flowing freely now. But he'll have the rest of his life knowing we love him unconditionally, that we never gave up on him, that we were victims too. That's what matters now. After Rico was led away in handcuffs, the family sat in stunned silence, trying to process the bombshell that had just exploded their understanding of the past 3 years. Mama, I feel like I'm losing my mind, Carmen said, staring at her hands. How is any of this real? Diego's been alive this whole time and we thought he was dead, very much alive. And according to what I learned yesterday when I finally got through to him, he's been studying for his GED in prison, taking college courses through correspondence programs, working in the prison library helping other inmates learn to read, trying to better himself despite believing his family had abandoned him completely. Miguel ran his hands through his hair. I visited his grave every month, brought flowers, talked to a headstone with nothing underneath it. The grave will be removed, Mrs. Rodriguez said. I've already contacted the cemetery. It was purchased under false pretenses. Carmen began crying again. What kind of person am I? My own nephew has been suffering in prison and I thought he was dead. I mourned him. I lit candles for his soul. You're the kind of person who loved him enough to grieve deeply, Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. That love is still real. It's still there. Now you can share it with him while he's alive to receive it. Rosa, who had been silent through most of this revelation, finally spoke up. Can we call him tonight? Can we talk to Diego right now? Mrs. Rodriguez smiled for the first time since this conversation began. The numbers programmed in that phone, extension 447. He's expecting calls from family now that the no-contact order has been lifted. Carmen took the phone with trembling hands. What do I say? How do I explain 3 years of believing he was dead? How do I apologize for not being there? Tell him you love him, Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. Tell him we all love him. Everything else can be figured out later. As Carmen stepped into the hallway to make the call, Mrs. Rodriguez turned to me with exhausted but peaceful eyes. Thank you for listening, for believing me when this all sounded like the ramblings of a dying woman, for helping me get justice. Mrs. Rodriguez, I have to ask, why did you wait so long to act? Why didn't you expose Rico sooner and save yourself years of suffering? She smiled weakly. I was waiting for the right moment. When Rico couldn't escape justice, couldn't wiggle out of consequences or disappear like cockroaches do when lights come on. But you're dying. How is this the right moment? Because now he can't hurt anyone else in my family. And because, she paused, struggling for breath, because dying people tell the truth. When I expose Rico, people will believe me. They always believe someone with nothing left to lose, nothing to gain from lying. She closed her eyes peacefully. Sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or violence. Sometimes it's just the truth, told at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right people. Mrs. Rodriguez passed away 4 hours later, holding Carmen's hand while Diego's voice came through the phone speaker, telling his grandmother he loved her and forgave everything. His last words to her were, "Thank you for saving me, abuela. Thank you for never giving up." The investigation into Rico Montenegro revealed a pattern of revenge-driven schemes targeting families of people who had wronged him over the past 15 years. 3 other families had been victimized in similar ways. Elaborate cons designed to inflict maximum psychological damage over extended periods. 6 months later, Diego was released from prison when Rico's conspiracy was fully exposed. The appeals court found that Rico had manipulated evidence and intimidated witnesses during Diego's original trial. The armed robbery conviction was overturned due to prosecutorial misconduct and the revelation that the primary victim had orchestrated a revenge plot. At Mrs. Rodriguez's grave on the first anniversary of her death, 3 generations of the Rodriguez family gathered for the first time in years. Diego, now working as a counselor for at-risk youth and taking college classes online, placed fresh flowers on his grandmother's headstone. The inscription read, "Elena Rodriguez, beloved mother, grandmother, she never stopped fighting for truth." Rico Montenegro was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for blackmail, fraud, conspiracy, elder abuse, and civil rights violations. He'll serve his time in the same prison system where Diego spent 3 years believing his family had abandoned him, though they made sure to house him at a different facility for everyone's safety. Diego visits his grandmother's grave every Sunday, the same day his family used to visit what they thought was his final resting place. He brings photos of his new apartment, his college acceptance letters, his counseling certification. He tells her about the kids he's helping stay out of prison, about the second chances he's giving others because she gave him one. Carmen keeps the recorder in a safe deposit box, as a reminder that truth always finds a way to surface, even when buried under years of lies and manipulation. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it requires someone brave enough to wait for the perfect moment to expose evil. But Mrs. Rodriguez was right. The truth always finds a way, especially when spoken by someone with nothing left to lose. The most shocking thing a dying person ever confessed to me wasn't just a secret. It was a masterpiece of patience, planning, and love that reached beyond the grave to save her grandson's future and destroy the man who had tortured her family for 3 years.